Nathan, welcome to the show. Really excited to be getting into your note buying business and how that relates to real estate and how real estate agents can get involved in that. Before we jump into all that goodness, how did you get into this business?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is
You
uh,
bet.
this is really good. I'm always happy to do all kinds of conversations. I love talking about notes, and so this is fun. How I got started. If you go back, you got to think of what it was like in 2005 and six. First of all, I was doing fix and flip
Remember.
like probably everybody else was, just because it was easy and the market was perfect for it. So it was good for me to get started that way, where I didn't have to do everything perfectly.
Were you using your own capital that time at that point?
I started off with my brother-in-law, who was my mentor slash financier at the beginning. And we've done different projects over the years, but that was the first real one where he put up some money for me, and that was great, very helpful. And then I started getting bank financing for it, and that worked out okay as well. Their banks are way slower but cheaper, so right off. But yeah, I was doing that for a couple of years. It was a lot of fun. I really liked that. Made some good money doing it, and then fast forward a couple of years, 2007. By the fall of 2007, I could feel it. There was something in the air. And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, I had
I
that
was like,
same we had that same thing. We knew something was going on. Actually,
uh-huh.
even a year earlier, 2006, the second half was brutal. So on the we didn't know why. It just slowed down. We were in on Cape Cod, so it's a resort area where
Okay.
the product isn't necessary, it's a want.
Yeah.
And ours was a seasonal property, and the prices of the year round started getting closer and closer, and the gap was shrinking, so our product became less and less attractive. And of course, it's all hindsight, right? We didn't
Yeah.
know what the heck was going on.
No,
So you
no.
so you started
Same thing.
feeling yeah, it's
I could
2007.
see, days on market and we're getting longer, and I'm like, yeah, something's about to shift here. And so sure enough, it did. And right,
How
hindsight,
were you leveraged out? Did you have properties out?
I had one property left that I hadn't sold yet. And then all of a sudden I couldn't sell it. And that was
Right.
just kind of sitting there. So I did what I thought you do, and I rented it out. And so I had a local property manager who was absolutely terrible, but only guy in town who would take my one residential property.
Right.
I was living out of town. So, I was really counting on this guy to just take care of things for me. And the thing that drove me the most crazy was, by the middle of the month, I would have to call him every month and be like, so, hey, did we get paid this month? Like, is everything okay? Oh, yeah. It's good, all good. It's all fine. But I just got to do some accounting. So consistently, I would, call somewhere between about the 15th and 20th of the month, and I'd get my check a few days later. But, never at the beginning of the month. It was always several weeks into the month. And then finally I'd get that check, and I was like, and then when we did have somebody move out, so I was living in Montreal. This was in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in the middle of the prairies. It was actually cheaper for me to fly out there with my suitcase full of tools and the sleeping bag and fix up the property, get, rehab whatever needed redoing, new paint, or it was faster, cheaper, easier for me to do that than to hire somebody locally.
Wow.
And so I was, noodling around in my head. I'm like, I don't really get this. I don't know why people do this rental thing. I don't know why this is so popular. It doesn't
How
seem like
far is
it's
that? What's the distance?
about a 3.5 hour plane ride.
Ooh.
So far enough,
Well,
so
how'd you get into that so far away?
oh, like so many things, right time, right place, the right conversation. I was actually, at the time, I had a Curbs franchise. So it was a gym for women. And a lady that I'd met through somebody said, hey, if you own a gym, surely you have to clean it. And I said, yeah, of course. She said, well, I can get you hooked up with cleaning supplies for really cheap. I said, okay, sure, let's meet. Sure enough, it was a Melaleuca pitch. And she was trying to get me going on Melaleuca, which is fine, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But during that conversation, she's the one that said, hey, isn't it crazy? Like, there's opportunity everywhere. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, real estate is really hot. And I'm like, what? I've been there. So to give you some context, that's like right above eastern Montana. Like it's like there's nothing there. It's
Right.
nothing but prairies, farmland. That's it. It's a small city, 200,000 people, and there's nothing there. It's like, really? But, I've just kind of locked it away in my head. I said no thanks to the Melaleuca thing, but I got home and I'm like, I know, my friend Rick, he still lives in Saskatoon. So I call him up and said, so tell me what's going on in Saskatoon? Like, is real estate really booming? And he's like, yeah, we're calling it Saskaboom right now. I'm like, you're kidding me. So I'm like, okay, I'm up for opportunity. And of course, at the time, it was all about the shows on TLC and Discovery Channel or Flip This House and all that.
Yeah.
So we figured, my wife and I were like, yeah, we could do that. And so that's how I got my start in that. And it was, like I say, it was great fun. I really enjoyed it. But in the end, when we got stuck with that one property, I'm like, I don't know. The fix and flip, I get this rental thing. I don't know. It's not working for me. A lot of work for, I think we're pulling in $400 a month, something like that. Like, it's not fantastic. I mean, I'll take the cash for sure, but I don't know. That was kind of my introduction to real estate. And I thought, okay, well, I like the idea of it. I can see some tremendous potential there. What else we got? And it was right around that time, fall 2008, a friend of mine, also from Canada, he moved down to California. He had met up with a bunch of investors there. They had bought a portfolio of properties, mostly centered in the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, where they were supposed to just buy it and then flip it out to another company. And this was all done in, early 2007. So the height of the market. And sure enough, that deal fell through. So by fall of 2008, they're like, shoot, what do we do? So they brought us and just said, you guys have some real estate experience, figure it out, do whatever you can. Here's power of attorney, no operating budget, no nothing, do what you can. And we're like, okay. So we thought we kind of invented seller financing. It's not something that's really done in Canada. So
Gotcha.
Inventive of coming up with this novel idea of how to sell property on terms. And that was the introduction into notes. And I was creating notes and I didn't even know that's what they were called.
Right.
So I found a guy that was teaching online, talking about what we were doing. And so I flew down to Houston, took his class. Sure enough, that was opening that door. And he's like, no, there's this conference coming up this fall. This is 2009. So I'll go down to Louisiana to go down to that conference. And I'm completely blown away just with the content and just the number of people that are there, all talking about something that I just barely discovered.
Let's back it up a second. And can you explain it's the first one you were doing, buyer seller financing, and how that worked?
Yeah, it was really great. We had these really rundown, like this was bought in April of 2000 before the crash. And these were really rough houses to begin with. So again, like I say, no operating budget. So our mentality going into it is, okay, why don't we just sell the properties as is? And the idea, the catchphrase we came up with was own a home for less than rent. So if local rent is $500, buy this house for $400 a month, kind of like a rent to own. That's the idea.
Yeah.
But part of the deal is you're responsible for fixing up the property. And that was kind of the very beginning stages of it. This is the idea.
They own it. They're the owners.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we set it up with, monthly payments, principal and interest, figuring it out as we went. I, had no idea. The first batch of the notes that we wrote were terrible. They were awful, but it was a beginning. That's how I got my start. And
how did those first ones work out? Did they pay off at the balloon time? I'm sure you had a balloon set up where they paid off in a certain amount of years. Refinance?
We did a combination. I think actually what we mostly did was we did shorter terms. So like 10-year notes.
Oh, wow.
But again, no idea. So we said, okay, so for your down payment, we'll do it as if it's a rental. So first and last month's rent. So if the monthly payment is $400, $800 for a down payment on a property that we're selling to you for $35,000. For the most part, they did not continue on with the contract. For the most part, they got into the property. And I think in most cases, they just realized how much work was involved in fixing up this property. And these were people that intended to live in it. So,
right.
These were not investors that were coming in to pick up property and then flip it themselves. This is people that wanted to live there. So it didn't go great, honestly, but the concept was there. And so then the concept.
What happened? There's a lovely concept. I've used it a couple of times. What's the outcome of those properties? What ended up happening? Do you have to resell them again?
I think in most cases we ended up having to resell them again, where people just quit paying for whatever reason. They, like I say, they realized it was more work than they thought it was. We did have some that did stay, and in a few cases, actually, that was the other thing I learned in getting introduced into this note business is that there are people out there that will buy these notes that I'm creating. I'm like, really? So that was my whole idea with these notes in the first place is I need a back end. I need somewhere to cash out of these because we don't actually want to hang on to them for 10 years.
Okay. So you weren't really interested in the income stream from the note?
Not at the time. No, these were somebody else's properties and I was just trying to get them as much cash as I could.
Okay.
They weren't looking for a long-term anything. They just wanted their cash back as much as they could. That was the original intent. And it worked. Like I say, the concept was there. The properties themselves were in rough shape, so that didn't help anything. And then I didn't know how to underwrite. The
Right.
borrowers, I had no idea how to like decide if they were good or if they were going to be, continual borrowers, that kind of thing.
So here you are, you invented this business that
Yeah.
happens to be already be huge,
Yeah.
and you get all these seminars, and where do you go from there? What was the next step after you flew down into those seminars?
One of those seminar sessions was all about, they called it bad paper or delinquent paper or non-performing or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And the first time I heard about that, I thought, man, that sounds so risky. Like that sounds like, why would you ever do that? And then I figured out why you would do that. At the time, there were thousands, literally thousands and thousands, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these that were delinquent, where people had stopped paying on their mortgage.
So we're looking at
And
2008, 9. What year are we now?
this was into about 2010.
2010. Okay.
Yeah. And so as an experiment, I had met a guy, he's like, yeah, I can sell you these non-performing notes. They're a package of 3 of them for $10,000, all in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm like, for $10,000, that sounds like a good experiment. Let's give it a shot. And again, coming from a real estate background, I'm like, my intention was to take over the property.
Yeah.
Which is a good strategy, and you can still do that today. I do it differently now, but anyway, we'll get into that. But the approach was find all 3 properties were vacant, find the owner, and then see if they will just sign the property over to me. And it was called the deed in lieu of foreclosure. So you sign the property over, I'll make the mortgage disappear. And the first 2 that I approached, both still lived in Columbus. One was a retired veteran, and he's like, yeah, where do I sign? The second one was a young girl, her and her boyfriend, they were probably, early 20s. Her and her boyfriend had picked up this extra property during the heyday where, no money down, all those things. Yeah, exactly. And with, great intentions, they were going to rent it out and have it as an income property. And then, of course, it all went sideways and south and all kinds of directions that shouldn't have gone. And they were stuck with it. So, and then they broke up. So now it's in her name and she's got this debt hanging over. So that was the real light bulb. I'd already talked to this veteran. I'm like, okay, this can work. Then I talked to her and I said, so I'm here. Here's the paperwork showing that I own the loan, but I'm not here to collect any money. All I want is the property. If you'll sign it over to me, I'll just make this loan disappear. And she started crying and she's just like so grateful. And she's like, really do that? I was getting all choked up. I'm like, holy smokes, this is amazing. Like, look what I'm actually doing for this person. I was not, there was no altruism going into this. I wanted the property. I wanted to make some money. And then I was like, wow, I'm actually solving some problems. This is really cool. So that really turned me onto it. And I'm like, okay, this is good stuff. Let's do more of this. And then I started buying non-performers, a lot of them. Got different investors, again, my brother-in-law, and then some other investors on board and started buying up non-performing loans left, right, and center. And over the years, hundreds of them. And they're great. They're tons of fun.
And then so now you own the property outright. What are you doing with it? Selling it
Well,
out way or
yeah, if I end up owning the property, which in those days, often I did, most of the time when I ended up owning the property is because it was already vacant. So they'd either abandoned it or somebody died or something like that. So taking back the property in that case, it was really rare, and still is. It's really rare that I actually foreclose on a person. I'm usually just foreclosing on an empty property just for that legal process to get me title. And then, yeah, as soon as I own it, I learned from my previous experience flipping houses across the country, I don't really want to be doing that from a distance and doing all the repairs and things. So in most cases, if I was reselling the property, I'd, look for a wholesaler, somebody that's going to pick it up and either fix it up or flip it or whatever they're going to do with it.
was great enough to make it worthwhile?
Right. Or if the house was in decent shape, then I would go back and again, learning from previous experience, it had to be in decent shape. If it's trashed, no, I'm not going to try that. Sell that to an owner occupant. It's
Right.
It's not going to work. I already know that. I've done that. So, but if it was good, maybe in that case, I would just do a paint job or something like that just to make it look pretty and then sell it on terms again and create more notes. And then again, I feel that there are these people that will buy performing notes.
So in a market where it was a buyer's market, there's plenty of listings in 2010. You're doing owner financing, creating a note, which you eventually would sell?
In those days, because I was working with just the way that I was working with investors, we would do like a profit split. So in order to do that, it really made the most sense to sell it. So to hang on to it long term, really doing that split is hard. And so it
Yeah.
was much
Right.
easier just to dispose of it one way or another.
Right.
So either it was a performing note that I was selling, or I took back a property and I'm just selling the property, and usually to a local investor.
So at this point, is Curbs still an up and running business, or is that done and you're doing this full time?
No, and so that was another one of those casualties of the recession. When people get nervous about their finances, what's one of the first things they cut out of the budget?
Right.
Gym member. So we ended up selling those at a fairly hefty loss back in 2009. So this had become the replacement. This had become kind of the new thing and the way to make some money.
Wow.
Because that had gone away.
What a shift in lifestyle
Very,
from
yeah.
having a building and customers and all that maintenance and property. You had to take care of it and keep it open, and employees. You
Mhm.
run around a couple different countries. Oh, was this just
Yeah.
in the US? Was it only in the US?
All US, yeah.
Let's coming to the US, and just you must have felt like you were a free person.
It was pretty on the one hand, lots of freedom of time and schedule and things like that. And at that point, we had little babies, and so that was wonderful.
Great.
On the other, like any entrepreneur, with that kind of business, it's unpredictable income. I have some big project close this month, and then next month, maybe or maybe not. And so planning that out became kind of a challenge, but overall it worked, and it actually worked pretty well. But still, just, those times of uncertainty are not as much fun.
No, no. They're not they're most often necessary though.
Yeah. And it was, it's a good learning curve. It was a great way to gain the experience and on the job training constantly and just learning new things all the time. It's been good. Fast forward all the way. Now we opened up an investment fund so that investors can put money into the fund. And now I'm not working with individual investors. Now it's all just in one big pot. I go out and I buy performing loans. So I'm now the guy that was buying those performing loans, and now it is.
It was that transition from going out
Yeah,
and doing
this is
deals for
skipping way
like
ahead.
friends, family, and just cutting it up at the end.
Mhm.
Now you're running a fund.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was that like? And it sounds like there was a regulatory issues in that as well. What's that about?
That was part of the consideration. Yeah. Working with different investors, part of the way to make that legal and to do it right is you can't mix money. And so what that means is I have to have a separate set of accounting books for every investor.
Mhm.
And it came up to just a little bit before COVID, 2019, 2020, where we had, I think, 23, 24 investors. So every quarter, we're having to go and prepare all the documents, all the reports and everything for all these different investors. And it was, like I say, just kind of running up just before COVID. And my wife is the one who did a lot of that prep work. And she's like, this is ridiculous. Like, she would spend most of a month every 3 months preparing all this stuff and getting it all ready so that I could then spend 3 days sending out the reports and, explaining where we're at with every property and all those different things. And like, it was a giant time suck. And so that was really the catalyst for everything, is just as COVID slowed down and everything just kind of came to a bit of a halt. We're like, okay, we've got a minute now, and it's going well, which is great. And so it's hard to fix it when it's going well enough that you don't want to take a break from it.
Right.
So when we were forced to take that break, it was really helpful to just take a step back and be like, okay, wait, this is what our time is looking like. This is what everything is kind of leading up to, is every 3 months we're having to do this. And it's crazy. Like, we're spending so much time doing this just on the administration side.
Right.
And then, we started looking at plus, then we've got, for every investor, let's say they've got $100,000 with me and we've got a couple of notes, and then there's always going to be some residual sitting on the sidelines that's too small to put to work. So, between $10,000 and $20,000 per investor. So when we added it all up, like, there was over $200,000 sitting there doing nothing. I'm like,
Right.
that's just ridiculous. Like, how ridiculous. So, but of course I can't mix it because
Right.
they're individual investors and that's illegal and I can't do that. And so we're like, okay, so how do we do that legally? How do we put these pieces together? And so that was, I'd known I should have put a fund together probably a few years before that, but everything was rolling. So it's hard to take a step back.
Absolutely.
So when we were forced to, that it really helped, actually, just to help slow us down enough to be like, okay, no, there's a better way. And then you're talking about, for the investor, then they're more protected because they're part of a bigger pool. And, now we're buying performing and like all these different things, far more predictable income, all those kinds of things. came into play. And
Okay,
we're
so
like,
you shifted the product that you were buying?
yeah, yeah. And it was very timely because at the same time, I'd been doing non-performing for the last 10 years. And just right at, COVID, when that hit, interestingly enough, overall, the economy actually did better, especially in housing. Then we saw prices start to rise and things like that. And so the availability of non-performers really dwindled. That coincided with our timing of wanting to make a change anyway, and just kind of putting all the pieces together. For us, it made way more sense to actually shift gears and go to that other side where we're now buying the performing loans. And so that, like I say, it's amazing how things tend to work out and all those
Right.
things get together, and it's been great.
And so how does it work with a performing note? What is that? I know with the underperforming or non-performing, you're selling them off. What are you doing with the performing ones?
For these, because of again, with a different structure, now we're paying investors a fixed rate of return, and then they put their money in. I can go out and buy whatever performing loans I can find, and there's plenty of deal flow for that. And I've got lots of sources and that kind of thing. And so I'll buy whatever loans I can, whatever makes sense, depending on available capital, all those kinds of things, and put it in the fund. And then we are looking for that long term. And now I buy both. Now I'm buying actually really short term loans between 6 and 18 months, or really long term loans, 25 to 30 years, and both for different reasons. But just the management of that is much different, a lot less in a lot of ways, where I'm not having to, follow foreclosure processes on this property and that one, and all those kinds of things, and talking to realtors all the time. And it took a lot off my plate, which was great. And it's allowed us to do some other things as well. So that's been a lot of fun.
So what kind of return is that? The interest rate's the interest rate. It's not hard money. Yeah. It's not like a big note. You're hanging on to, which, back a while ago, the interest rates, they're not phenomenal, right?
Right. Yeah.
How is that worth it?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. So I'm mostly buying seller finance paper. Couple reasons. One of the biggest ones for me, is that the seller finance paper tends to be higher interest rate. Usually, and I encourage people who are doing seller finance, charge a higher interest rate. It's your specialty product. You should be charging more. If the bank is doing 7, you're charging 9, that kind of idea. So if that's the case, the target return, the total target return that I'm looking for in the fund is at least 12%. And then I pay my investors 8%. So if it's a note that I'm looking at written at 9 or 10%, I buy it at a discount in order to get up to that 12. And then I can hang on to that. I can sell it at some point if I'd like or not. And I can just hang on to it. Mostly I actually sell them after a couple of years just to get that capital back, and I can turn it back around.
Now, with these when you say you have plenty of sources for these notes, are they the actual homeowner that has these owner finance loans, or have they already been sold once?
No, so these are actually homeowners, yes, but they are more like the lending companies. So whoever created that loan in the first place. And, my ideal is somebody who's doing it as a business, where they've acquired property, however they do it. Then they are selling that property with seller finance, creating a note, and then selling off the note to somebody like me.
I guess
that's ideally that's who I'm looking for.
So it's an institution that that had to take back the property. They have their own note on it. Yeah, and then you're buying that.
Yeah, or smaller, kind of private companies where that's their hustle. They'll go out and find a property, maybe at auction, maybe, I don't know. It's not my specialty. I don't know how they're getting the property, but they'll pick it up for cheap enough that they can then resell it for market value, which is, 20, 30,000 more, or whatever it is. Collect that down payment, create a note, sell off the note, and go back and do it again.
What's the risk?
Risk is actually the property. So it is both the collateral, it's both the safety and the risk, which is kind of an interesting.
Right.
Anytime, especially with those non-performers, if I was taking back a property, like I say, it's because it was already vacant. So when I take back that house, if it's been vacant for a while, vandals have got in, they've stolen the copper and this, that, and the other, that's my risk. Before I buy the loan, I don't get to see the inside of the property. So we're what we think the condition is. And, we'll have a local realtor go out and give us their best estimate, but that's what we're going off of. When I'm buying, I buy with enough equity to plan for those kind of contingencies. But of course, it doesn't always go the way it should go. 99 times out of 100, yes, but every once in a while you get stuck with one and like, oh man, it's full of mold or who knows, whatever.
So you pay your investors first?
Yeah, pay the investors first. They get the preferred return. I get the leftovers.
Right. Wow. Okay. So who can get involved in this fund?
So the fund is actually it's a 506c, meaning it's for accredited investors. So accredited meaning anybody who makes either over $200,000 or they have over $1 million in net worth outside of their primary residence. That's the government's definition of that. I'd love to change that one day, but that's not my job.
And do you have a minimum buy-in?
Yeah, minimum's 50,000, maximum's $1 million. And as fast as money comes in, it goes right back out the door, back into a note.
So can I ask what kind of numbers you have going up? How many notes?
It's still relatively new. Like we're less than 100 notes, and we're looking to get up to a little over 100 by the time we're fully funded. It's a small fund, just 5 million. So once we're fully funded, we should be somewhere between 100 and 120 notes that we're managing. And then, like I say, the longer term ones, I will be selling those off. We haven't gotten there yet, but we just did sell one a couple weeks ago. But as they come up, here's the secret strategy. So let's say we've got unpaid balance on a property is $100,000. Property's worth whatever, 125, 150,000. So I've got some equity built in there at $100,000 balance. I'm going to buy that for maybe 75, 80,000. Let's call it 80. So I bought it for 80 at the beginning of a loan, a long-term 25, 30-year note. Most of that payment, the monthly payment that the borrower makes, most of that goes towards interest. I think we've all seen that on our own mortgages. So my job then, part of it is I look and see, okay, so I bought it for 80,000 at a 12% yield. After 2 years of payment, the unpaid principal balance goes from 100 down to 99.5. If the unpaid balance is now at 99.5, can I then resell that for 80,000? The same money that I put into it 2 years ago, so that I can get the capital back out, recycle it, and put it back into something else before that balance drops too low and now I have to sell it for less than I bought it for. So that's part of my job, is doing that.
Wow. Learning curve looks pretty steep.
It's been steep, but I've had long enough to experience different things. It's been good. You look back on life and like, what would you change? I don't know that I would change anything, because if this didn't happen, then I wouldn't have learned that. And if this didn't go that way, then how would I have learned that lesson? So I'm grateful for the bumps and bruises along the way. It's been good.
Yeah. Cool. So somebody wants to get involved with your fund. Is it accredited investors only? What's the process for them to get involved?
First things first, just give me a call. We'll start a conversation, make sure our goals align, and then
So to get involved, what's the process?
It's a phone call. First of all, we'll have a chat and make sure goals align and it makes sense for both of us. And then it's some pretty easy paperwork, honestly. There are a few documents for you to look over, only one of them to sign, and just make sure you understand it before you sign anything. But yeah, it's pretty seamless. We can use, cash on hand, IRA cash, whatever works.
Oh, stick on that one for a second. IRA cash. So
yeah,
somebody has a self-funded IRA, they can use that money in this type of investment.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to use your IRA. Like, speaking as someone who doesn't have an IRA, I'm Canadian, so I don't have my own, but I can put yours to work. Great place to park it and just let it sit. We have the option in ours. We do a quarterly payout. You have the option if you'd like. And I would recommend, if it's an IRA, just let it roll over and let that compound. And then that 8% turns into 8.5%. Over time, turns into 9, turns into 9.5. Just the longer you leave it in there, the more compounds and grows.
Nice. Okay. What is the risk on the market if there's another shift of some bizarre kind? Are you, with that discount that you're getting, you feel like you're in good shape?
Yeah, we're pretty well insulated. It's interesting to see as interest rates go up and down and inflation and all those different things. We're fairly well insulated, because when I buy a note, I'm buying an existing set of terms. So it's not something speculative. It's not, the value may go up or down or something like that. It is what it is. It's already in the paperwork. It's there. If somebody stops paying, then we've got to deal with it. But on that front end, I've already built in, we do an investment to value ratio. So at least a 25% investment to value in case of, if the market tanks again, and then I'm betting that it won't tank more than 25% on the value of that particular property. If they do stop paying, if property values drop, we still have a built-in cushion where I can take back that property if I need to, and then resell it at least to get our money back out. In most cases, we didn't actually talk about this, but in most cases, if the house is still occupied, ways that we can work with somebody to help them stay in the home, which again feels good. And frankly, it's more profitable that way anyway.
Okay, cool. That's great. Nathan Turner, thanks so much for coming on the show. All your contact, I'll have some contact information. People can find you. If you're watching the show to the end, please comment. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll definitely answer questions. Nathan, you kind of already referred to this, but knowing what you know now, what would you tell that person back in the day when you were doing your first flip?
I would say is just hang on. It's going to be good. It's going to be great. Just keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. Roll with the punches. They're going to come. If anyone's an entrepreneur and they don't know that yet, it's going to come, and that's fine. And you're going to learn and you're going to get better.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Nathan. Be
Hey, my
best.
pleasure.
Have fun.
Take care.